So people spend the majority of their life living this way. And the brain gets stuck into a high gear, and it stays stuck in these aroused patterns. And it's always looking out of the landscape of the environment to see what could possibly be a danger and prepare for it. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Let's begin. Hi everybody, Dr. Joe here. So we have three types of stress: physical stress, trauma, accidents, injuries, falls. We have chemical stress. Chemical imbalance comes from viruses, bacteria, toxins, food allergies, hangovers. And we have emotional stress. That can be anything from family tragedies to second mortgages to single parenting to financial crisis. All of those things knock the brain and body out of balance. And all organisms can tolerate short-term stress. And when we perceive a threat or a danger in our outer world, there's an arousal that takes place. And the arousal is the mobilization of enormous amounts of energy to protect us from some danger in our outer world. So when we perceive that threat, we turn on part of the autonomic nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight nervous system. And its job is to preserve the body from some danger in the environment. And in order to do that, it's got to mobilize and take all of the body's resources in that emergency state and mobilize it and make energy to prepare itself for that danger. And when we draw all this energy to begin to prepare ourselves for that danger or threat, the body moves out of balance. Pupils dilate, salivary juices shut off, respiratory rate increases, heart rate increases, glucose is mobilized, enormous amounts of blood flow is sent to the extremities, away from the internal organs for metabolism, because we're ready to do one of three things: to run as fast as we can, to stay and fight, or to freeze and hide. All organisms can tolerate short-term stress. If a zebra gets chased by a lion and she outruns the lion and the event is over, the zebra will return back to homeostasis and balance within a short period of time and go back to grazing, and the event is over. Now, if you're being chased by Tyrannosaurus Rex, just say, and Tyrannosaurus Rex is catching up to you, you would have to agree with me then you would tap all of your body's resources to outrun Tyrannosaurus Rex. In other words, you wouldn't go 20% in, or you wouldn't go 40% or 60%, and you would go all in. And if Tyrannosaurus Rex chased you into a cave and you could smell his breath breathing in the cave, you would also have to agree with me then you would keep that stress response going. You would keep it going, because if you fell asleep, you could be prey. But what if it's not Tyrannosaurus Rex that's outside the cave? What if it's your coworker sitting right next to you in the next desk? That means that what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive, because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. Why? Because if you're mobilizing all the body's resources for some threat in your outer world, then there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. There's no energy to heal. Now, the problem is that people all of a sudden become like junkies. The arousal of the stress hormones, the release of all that energy, people become highly dependent on that rush of adrenaline. And they need the problems and the conditions in their life to reaffirm their dependence on that chemical. They need the bad job. They need the poor relationship. They need to remember the past, because it makes them feel something. So here's the challenge. Because the emotions of anger and aggression and hatred and frustration and impatience and resentment, competition and envy and jealousy and fear and anxiety and worry, of pain, suffering, guilt, shame, hopelessness, powerlessness, those are all the emotions that are derived from the hormones of stress, and psychology calls those normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness. And it turns out that some people spend 70% of their lives living by these hormones of stress. They're living in survival all the time. Now, when you're living in survival, the arousal of those chemicals causes you to put all of your attention on your body because you're being chased by T-Rex. You better be thinking about your body. So the arousal of those stress hormones heightens your awareness, and you put your attention on your body because your body has to be saved. If you're being chased by T-Rex, you're going to be looking in your environment where you need to go. And so you put all of your attention on your environment. If you're being chased by T-Rex, where are you going to go in your environment? And if he's breathing down your neck, you're going to be thinking about how much time you have to get somewhere. The body, the environment, and time. Now, where you place your attention is where you place your energy, as I've been saying all along. And living in survival means then you start to believe that you're your body. You start to keep all of your attention on all of those elements in your outer environment, and we become preoccupied with time. And now all of our attention is trapped into this three-dimensional reality, and now we have to play by the rules of Newtonian physics. That means that anything we create, because all of our attention is trapped in three-dimensional reality, is going to take time for them to appear in your life. So when we draw from this invisible field of electromagnetism, when we draw from this invisible field of life force that's surrounding our body during the stress response, and we turn it into chemistry, the field around our body shrinks. Now, for the short term, that's fine, because if you rest and repair, body returns back to balance and the field expands. But what if you keep doing this on a daily basis, keep reacting to the same coworker, keep reacting to your boss, keep reacting to traffic, keep reacting to the news, keep thinking about the past, or keep anticipating the worst case scenario in your future? If you keep doing this and keeping the stress response going for an extended period of time, and you keep drawing from this field surrounding your body and turning it into chemistry, and your field around your body shrinks, you're going to feel more like matter and less like energy, more like particle and less like wave. And in fact, the hormones and stress heighten the senses and causes us to become materialists. In other words, when we're under the stress response, and the arousal that alters us causes us to narrow our focus on the cause, and we focus on objects and things. That's where the danger is. And now, this is where the challenge happens, because when people get hooked into the dependency of the rush of these chemicals for the arousal, and they need the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their conditioning to that emotion, that means now they're becoming addicted to the very life they don't even like. And human beings can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. They can think about their problems and produce the same chemistry as if the event was actually occurring. Now, they're becoming addicted to their own thoughts. And if they're using the same people and the same conditions in their life, they're becoming addicted or dependent on the same. That means nothing new could happen in their life. In fact, they're running from the unknown. They're craving the familiar. And if it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, wow, it makes sense then that we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Our thoughts can literally make us sick. So is it possible then that our thoughts can make us well? And we've done research to prove that you can strengthen your immune system in 4 days just by trading those limited emotions of survival for elevated emotions like gratitude, appreciation, joy, freedom, love. It's those elevated emotions then that strengthen the body and the immune system back into balance and health. So then, when we're under the gun of those fight or flight chemicals, and stress is created by not being able to predict something known, the perception that something is getting worse, or the loss of control. Now, that's what begins to trigger the stress response. So then when we feel a loss of control, when we feel like we can't predict the next moment, when we have the perception that something's getting worse, then we do the exact opposite. We try to control and predict everything in our life and change it. Now remember, every person, Every object, everything, every body, every place has a neurological network in your brain, and because we've experienced them, it has an emotion associated with it. So then the moment we start losing control and we want to get control back, the arousal of the stress hormones begins to activate the brain and body to become super alert. And now we shift our attention from our boss to our spouse, to our coworkers, to running errands, to going to this place, to our cell phone, to our emails, to all of our problems. And like a lightning storm in the clouds, we start firing these different circuits in our brain. And they start firing out of order. And if you were to measure the brain when we do this, the brain starts functioning very incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. Now imagine that people do this on a daily basis, and over time, the brain begins to compartmentalize. It becomes like a house divided against itself, and the brain stays switched on into these super aroused states. And now the person is, all of their attention is on their environment, waiting for the next danger to occur. And out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field that exist, when we're living in survival, when we're living in stress, we will select the worst case scenario in our mind, and we will prepare for the worst. And we'll think about that future and begin to emotionally embrace that outcome in fear, in worry, in anxiety, in hostility. And it's the act of combining that vision of the future with the emotion of survival that's conditioning the body to begin to become the mind of that emotion. Now we're beginning to subconsciously become fearful, subconsciously become hostile. And so now that means to me that as a person selects the worst case scenario and prepare for the worst, there's better chances of survival if we prepare for the worst, because if anything less happens, more than likely we're prepared for it. So people spend the majority of their life living this way. And the brain gets stuck into a high gear, and it stays stuck in these aroused patterns. And it's always looking out of the landscape of the environment to see what could possibly be a danger and prepare for it. Now, people spend the majority of their lives living this way, and we've done enough brain scans to see that when a person gets stuck in this state, and the brain is stuck in that highly aroused state, that as they shift their attention from one person to one object to a place to another object to a thing, and they start firing these circuits, and the brain starts functioning in that aroused state and very incoherently, that if they're analyzing or thinking about the problems in their life while they're in that aroused state, they tend to make their brain worse. So if the hormones of stress then cause us to become materialists, and our senses become heightened, and the arousal of those stress hormones causes us to narrow our focus on the cause, and we draw from this invisible field of energy surrounding our body, turning it into chemistry, and the field around our body shrinks, and we feel more like matter and less like energy, and we're narrow our focus on everything material, then all of a sudden we start to experience separation from everyone and everything. In other words, we're fooled into the illusion by our senses of separation. Now, the quantum model of reality says that we are connected to everything that exists beyond the material world. So then if we're living by the hormones of stress and we're experiencing separation, and there's me here and there's you there, then all of a sudden now, if I want to get things to occur in my life and I'm matter trying to influence matter because I believe I'm my body, all of my attention's on my body, all of my attention is on all the elements in my environment, and my attention is on time, and where I place my attention is where I place my energy, then all of my attention and energy is trapped in this three-dimensional reality, then I got to play by the rules of Newtonian physics, which means that everything is going to take time as long as I believe I'm separate from everyone and everything. So here I am now, Joe Dispenza, one point of consciousness, one point of awareness, and let's say I wanted to walk to my car. Another point of consciousness, another point of awareness. If I'm matter executing or trying to change matter, it makes sense then as I move from one point to another point, one point of awareness to another point of awareness, my car, I have to move my body through space. And as I move my body through space, I experience time. So then everything that I create in this three-dimensional reality, I'm going to try to predict, I'm going to try to estimate, I'm going to try to forecast. It's going to be everything that I know to get what I want, and it's just going to take a certain amount of time. As an example, if I want to buy a house and I love the home and I don't have the money to pay for it, it makes sense that I'm going to have to work to pay for it. I'm going to have to drag my body to work every single day to pay for that house, and I'm going to estimate how long it's going to take over 30 years to pay the house off. And I may have to work extra hours or do extra things to make additional money. That's matter trying to influence matter. And so then when we are trying to produce outcomes in our life and we're aroused by the hormones of stress and we're matter trying to change matter, we always try to force outcomes, control outcomes, predict outcomes, fight for outcomes, manipulate outcomes, compete for outcomes, because we can only do a certain amount of things when we are trapped by the rules of three-dimensional reality of matter trying to change matter.